If you started today with $200,000 invested, real capital, set aside strictly to grow, how long would it take to reach 1 million? Most people assume it requires brilliance, perfect timing, finding the next great stock before everyone else does. But the uncomfortable truth is that none of those things are actually required. Turning $200,000 into 1 million is far less about intelligence and far more about endurance. Because the hardest part of the journey is surviving the years when it feels like nothing is happening. Years when the numbers move slowly, when progress feels invisible, when staying invested begins to feel almost irrational. And a reason for that frustration is simple. Wealth does not grow in a straight line. It grows on a curve. And once you understand that curve, the entire timeline to $1 million starts to make sense. The fundamental problem is that human beings are wired to think linearly, assuming equal time always produces equal progress. But compounding does not work that way. Compounding is exponential, and exponential growth behaves very differently from linear growth. The difference is this: feeling like nothing meaningful is happening for a decade, then watching your wealth accelerate dramatically in the final years. Consider year 1, investing $200,000 at 8% annual return, a realistic, historically grounded figure for a diversified portfolio. That earns you approximately $16,000, real, meaningful money. But measured against a $1 million goal, it can feel almost irrelevant. You committed to a serious strategy, stayed disciplined for an entire year, and the target still feels impossibly far away. That feeling is precisely where most people begin to doubt themselves. They look elsewhere for something faster, something better. They hear about someone who made a fortune through a well-timed bet and start questioning whether the patient, steady path is right after all. What they are missing is this: slow progress in the early years is not a warning signal that the strategy is broken. It is an inevitable and mathematically necessary feature of how exponential growth begins. In the early years, you are building the base. Every dollar quietly compounding in year 3 becomes the dollar that generates outsized returns in year 15. That is how the curve works. The investors who do not understand this quit too early, not because they made bad choices, but because they mistook slow progress for no progress. That misreading, slow progress confused for no progress, is the single most common reason people never reach their wealth goals. Let us follow the actual numbers through the journey. $200,000, diversified portfolio, automatic dividend reinvestment, 8% average annual return. By the end of year 5, your portfolio has grown to roughly $293,000. Pause and sit with that for a moment. 5 full years of discipline and commitment, and you haven't even crossed $300,000. Against a $1 million goal, it barely feels like movement. This is the stage that tests most people's resolve most severely. The natural response is to question whether the rate of return is even sufficient, whether a more aggressive approach might accelerate things, whether the goal is realistic within any reasonable time frame at all. But what is actually happening beneath the surface during these years is both invisible and absolutely critical. The base is growing, quietly, steadily, without any fanfare or dramatic moments. Every year of early compounding is constructing the platform that launches everything that comes afterward. The right mindset during this first stage is not excitement or expectation of visible rewards. It is patience. Pure, deliberate, unwavering patience. Showing up consistently, maintaining your asset allocation, reinvesting every return automatically, trusting a process that won't feel rewarding for a while yet. The investors who master this stage do not do so by making it feel exciting. They do so by understanding why it matters, even when it doesn't feel like it does. Around years 8 through 15, something begins to change. Not the strategy itself, but the lived experience of following it. By year 8, your portfolio has grown to approximately $370,000. That same 8% annual return now delivers nearly $30,000 in a single year, almost double what it produced back in year 1. Not because anything changed, purely because the base it's working from has grown substantially. By year 12, you're approaching $500,000. The annual return is now generating around $40,000 from the exact same discipline and percentage. From the same strategy, the same return, you are now earning more than twice what you earned at the very beginning of this journey. This is also the stage where something significant shifts psychologically. You start to genuinely believe in the destination for the first time. In the early years, $1 million remained an abstraction, a number living somewhere in a theoretical future, distant and uncertain. But when your portfolio crosses $450,000, the destination stops feeling theoretical. It starts feeling inevitable. The doubt that characterized the early stage quiets considerably. A more settled, evidence-based confidence begins to replace it, built on real numbers. You are no longer pushing through uncertainty on faith alone. You are watching the strategy work in real time with real results in front of you. What most people underestimate about this middle stage is that its momentum was not created here. It was built entirely during the years when nothing seemed to be happening. Every quiet, unremarkable year of early compounding was silently accelerating the returns that are only now becoming visible and felt. This is precisely why abandoning the strategy during the first stage is so costly. You don't simply lose the capital you had at that moment. You lose access to this stage entirely, and with it, every compounding gain that would have followed from here forward. By year 17 and 18, your portfolio has crossed $700,000, and now the mathematics become genuinely striking, worth dwelling on carefully. At $700,000, an 8% annual return delivers $56,000 in a single year. Think about that for a moment. In just 12 months, your portfolio grows by more than a quarter of your entire original investment. The numbers are no longer quiet. By the time you are approaching $800,000, the annual return is generating $64,000 from the same unchanged strategy. The final stretch between $800,000 and $1 million closes faster than any comparable stretch in the entire journey before it. Consider that contrast clearly. Growing from $200,000 to $400,000, your first $200,000 in gains, took roughly 9 years. Growing from $800,000 to $1 million, that same $200,000 distance takes approximately 2 to 3 years. The same dollar distance, covered in a fraction of the time. That is the compounding curve expressing itself at full and unrestrained force. And the people who get to experience this final acceleration are not people who found a smarter investment or made better market calls along the way. They are simply the people who refused to quit during year 4 when progress felt invisible and the goal felt impossibly far away. To be specific, because these numbers matter, at 10% average annual return, $200,000 reaches $1 million in approximately 17 years. That 10% figure is historically consistent with long-term broad market index investing without any additional contributions beyond the initial amount. At 8%, that timeline extends to roughly 22 years. At a more conservative 6%, the journey stretches to 28 or 30 years. Contributions change the picture meaningfully. Adding $5,000 per year at 8% shortens the journey from 22 years down to around 19. Even modest contributions of $125 per month at 6% can bring you within reach of $1 million over 25 years. The math accommodates consistency and rewards it generously. Small, regular additions compound just as powerfully as the original capital over time. The variables within your control are straightforward. Reinvest every dividend and return automatically. Never treat gains as spendable income. Use tax-advantaged accounts, a 401k, a traditional IRA, a Roth IRA, to shield your compounding from annual tax erosion that quietly reduces your effective return. And minimize fees with real intentionality. A 1% difference in annual costs on a $500,000 portfolio represents $5,000 every single year. $5,000 every year that could have been compounding on your behalf instead, quietly working, quietly growing, quietly building your future wealth. The true cost of high fees is always larger than it appears because the damage itself compounds alongside everything else in your portfolio. On the positive side, the single most powerful accelerator available to any investor is also the simplest, letting every return fold back into the portfolio. That one habit, sustained consistently over years, is what transforms a reasonable strategy into an exceptional and lasting long-term outcome. So how long does it actually take to reach $1 million from $200,000? Between 17 and 22 years for most disciplined investors, shorter with consistent additional contributions, longer with high fees, avoidable tax drag, or withdrawals taken during market downturns. Where you land within that range depends almost entirely on behavior over time, not brilliance, not market knowledge, not finding the perfect investment. But here is the deeper truth worth sitting with long after the numbers fade. The timeline to $1 million is long by design, not because wealth building is inaccessible or reserved for the privileged few, but because compounding operates on a curve, not a straight line. Curves, by their mathematical nature, start slowly and end dramatically. Every early year that feels invisible is building the base that makes later growth explosive. Every year you remain invested, through doubt, through volatility, through the temptation to do something different, that year is quietly compounding into something powerful. Your future self will benefit from those quiet years in ways that are genuinely difficult to fully appreciate in the present moment. The journey from $200,000 to $1 million is ultimately a test of one thing: whether you can stay committed long enough for the mathematics to fully express themselves. Most people fail that test not because they chose bad investments, but because they did not understand the shape of the journey they were on. They expected a straight line, encountered a curve, and concluded that progress was not happening. But it was. It always was. The compounding was working through every quiet, unremarkable year, building the base that would eventually deliver $56,000 in annual returns, then $64,000, then more. Returns that once seemed extraordinary becoming entirely ordinary as the portfolio grew large enough to support them naturally and consistently. That's the real story of how long it takes, not a story about markets, strategies, or investment vehicles, a story about time and patience, and the willingness to trust a process that rewards you most in the years that follow, the years when trusting it was hardest. The question was never really how long it takes. The question is whether you are willing to give it the time it genuinely needs.